The first thing I did on the morning my academic career supposedly ended was argue with a door. Not metaphorically. The Eastern dormitory at Aqmar Academy had an ironwood entrance covered in 600 years of protective enchantments, including one designed to prevent hostile jinn from entering student residences. I put my palm against the brass plate. The door flashed orange. Student identity confirmed, it announced. Then it flashed red. Jinn presence detected. Then orange again. Student identity confirmed. I closed my eyes. Behind me, Muna Fall said, "Perhaps if you apologize for existing in an administratively confusing manner." I did that yesterday. You sounded insincere. I was. The door thought about me for another 7 seconds before deciding that the safest solution was apparently to lock itself. I climbed through the window. That should tell you almost everything about what being half-djinn at the greatest magical academy in Africa was like. Almost. I was 19 years old, in my 3rd year at Aqmar Academy of the Seven Horizons, and I had exactly 18 minutes to reach the Hall of Ancestral Thaumaturgy before Professor Kadir Sal officially removed me from the Advanced Elemental program. The reason? I had set fire to something that could not burn. To be fair, I had warned them. The previous afternoon, Kadir had asked our class to stabilize a basalt mana prism using the standard 12-point containment sequence. The prism was supposedly inert to heat. That was the point. Students could practice directing elemental force into it without damaging anything expensive. I placed my hands on the formation. The human half of my magic engaged first. Blue lines of structured mana traced the 12 points exactly as they should. Then the other half woke up. Heat gathered beneath my ribs. The air smelled faintly of copper and rain on hot stone. The prism turned white. I released the spell immediately. The basalt caught fire anyway. Not ordinary fire. Blue-white flame crawled across stone that had survived dragon furnaces, while every brass lamp in the classroom leaned toward me as if listening. Nobody screamed. Aqmar students were trained better than that. They simply moved 3 steps away, which somehow felt worse. Professor Kadir extinguished the prism with a master-level nullification seal and stared at me for a long time. Then he said, exactly as predicted. I hated those 3 words. Kadir was 62, silver-bearded, broad-shouldered, and so respected that his textbook was used from Marrakesh to Mombasa. His doctrine of separate flames had shaped magical education for nearly 30 years. According to that doctrine, human magic and jinn magic were fundamentally incompatible. Humans shaped ambient mana through structure. Geometry, spoken equations, seals, symbols, instruments, carefully maintained channels. Jinn did not shape magic. They imposed themselves upon it. A fire jinn did not cast flame. Flame recognized its owner. A wind jinn did not calculate pressure. The wind obeyed. And those 2 systems, Kadir taught, could coexist near each other, cooperate with each other, even produce children together. But they could not occupy one magical core without damaging it. People like me were the proof. Half-djinn were supposed to have irregular mana, heightened resistance to certain spells, unpredictable elemental surges, and none of the complete racial abilities possessed by full jinn. No veil step. No smokeless form. No dominion sense. No ember memory. No sovereign voice. My father had been jinn, my mother was human. So according to Kadir's life's work, I was not 2 inheritances combined. I was 2 inheritances interfering. The burning basalt prism was, in his opinion, another symptom. I reached the Hall of Ancestral Thaumaturgy with 38 seconds remaining. The door opened for Muna. It refused me. I went through a lecture room window. Again. Professor Kadir was waiting beside a semicircle of 12 faculty members. "You understand why we are concerned," he said. No, I replied. I understand why you are concerned. I disagree with the reason. A muscle moved in Muna's cheek. That was her trying not to smile. Kadir gestured toward a suspended crystal containing a miniature image of yesterday's burning prism. You were instructed to produce a containment lattice. I did. You produced spontaneous dominion behavior inside a structured spell. That is what I have been trying to tell you. You produced instability. There is a difference. Kadir's expression barely changed. Not when the result is uncontrolled. That part hurt because it was true. I had not intended to ignite the prism. I could make jokes about people being afraid of me, and frequently did, but I was afraid too. I had lived my entire life with magic that never behaved exactly as anyone expected. When I was 8, I sneezed and every cooking flame in my mother's house went sideways. At 13, I accidentally heated a well bucket until the rope smoked. At 16, I discovered that human fire wards weakened when I became angry near them. There was always an explanation. Half-blood, incomplete core, unstable inheritance. My external goal was simple enough. I wanted Aqmar's highest magical certification. Not because I loved certificates. Because a full 7 Horizons qualification meant no provincial governor, merchant house, djinn court, or magical institution could legally classify me as an unlicensed mixed-blood hazard. It meant I could work wherever I wanted, travel wherever I wanted, live without asking someone more respectable to sign a document stating that I was unlikely to explode. Kadir removed me from the course anyway. He also suspended my access to the advanced archive and 3 elemental laboratories. I stood there listening while he explained the restrictions in very reasonable language. That was almost the worst part. He was not shouting. He was not insulting me. He genuinely believed he was protecting people. When he finished, I asked, "If my magic is doing something your doctrine says cannot happen, why is your first conclusion that the magic is wrong?" Silence. Kadir studied me. Because, Nahla, nature is not obligated to preserve you while you prove a theory. For 1 second, I had nothing clever to say. Then he added, "There are boundaries built into inheritance for reasons we may not fully understand." That gave me my answer. He did not fully understand. Neither did I. But only one of us was pretending that uncertainty was proof. I left the hall furious. Muna followed. We crossed one of Aqmar's high bridges while hot desert wind pushed at our robes. Below us, the academy spread across black stone terraces cut into the cliffs outside Tasseret. 7 towers stood around the central campus, each capped with a floating ring of light. Those towers formed the 7 Horizon Array. 7 senior masters working together could shield the academy and most of Tasseret from magical storms. As a first-year student, I had considered the people capable of controlling those towers nearly divine. At 19, I still considered them terrifyingly powerful. I was angry enough to say, "I am going to prove him wrong." Muna adjusted the bundle of warding rods under her arm. "That is not a plan. It has verbs. 1 verb. It is a strong verb." She stopped walking. "Nahla." I looked at her. Muna was 20, human, and studying ward engineering because she wanted to maintain the protective networks around remote settlements where a failed barrier could mean an entire village losing its water, homes, or crops to magical storms. She cared about magic that worked. Not impressive magic. Not famous magic. Working magic. That was why she was my best friend. "If you want to prove Kadir wrong," she said, "stop trying to demonstrate that you can survive instability." I frowned. What should I demonstrate? That it isn't instability. She pointed at my chest. "Your magic keeps behaving according to 2 systems at once. Everyone keeps asking which half is failing." Then she tapped her temple. Maybe ask what happens if neither half is failing. That sentence changed my life. I wish I could say I understood immediately. I did not. My first response was, "That sounds annoyingly reasonable." Muna smiled. "I'm putting it on your grave." We went to the student library because Kadir had only banned me from the advanced archive. He had been very specific. I decided to respect his instructions exactly. That was the beginning of his second mistake. Human spellwork made sense when you looked at it long enough. That was one of the things I loved about it. A spell might be difficult. It might require 17 interdependent geometries, 3 different mana frequencies, precise timing, and a spoken stabilizing phrase. But somewhere inside the complexity was logic. Jinn magic was infuriatingly different. The surviving texts written by full jinn described racial abilities with instructions like, "Step through the flame as you would step through memory." That is not an instruction. That is poetry pretending it has workplace responsibilities. For 6 days, Muna and I occupied a corner of the student library and compared everything we could legally access about human short-range teleportation with everything publicly available about Veilstep. Veilstep was one of the most famous jinn abilities. A full jinn with sufficient affinity could enter fire, intense heat, or even shimmering desert air and emerge somewhere else. Distance depended on power and familiarity. Humans had tried to reproduce it for centuries. They had failed. Human teleportation worked differently. It required constructing an exact relationship between 2 locations, anchoring both, calculating displacement, enclosing the traveler's body inside a translation field, and moving matter without allowing the intervening space to tear it apart. It was difficult. It was expensive. It was also slow enough that walking was often more practical. The first time Muna showed me a third-year translation diagram, I stared at it for nearly a minute. Then I turned to a jinn account of Veilstep. Then back to the diagram. "Muna." "No. I haven't said anything." "You made the face." "What face?" "The face you make immediately before property becomes educational." I pushed both books toward her. Human teleportation had an excellent answer for where. It knew the origin. It knew the destination. It knew the exact spatial relationship between them. Its problem was moving physical matter through that relationship efficiently. Veilstep solved the opposite problem. The jinn body became magical flame. Matter stopped being a problem. The racial ability moved effortlessly. But every description said successful Veilstep depended upon an instinct called the Ember Path. Full jinn felt the destination. Half jinn did not. We supposedly lacked the complete flame core necessary for that instinct. I looked at Muna. "What if I don't need the instinct?" She looked at the human diagram. Then the jinn text. Then me. Her eyes widened. "Oh, that is a terrible idea." "You see it." "I see why it is a terrible idea." "Which means you see it." She groaned. We started with 2 lamps. Distance, 4 meters. Human geometry calculated the relationship between their flames. My human mana drew the structure. Then I tried to feed jinn fire through it. Nothing happened. Attempt 2 produced a headache. Attempt 3 extinguished both lamps and set Muna's notebook smoking. Attempt 4 made my left hand briefly transparent. That was concerning. Attempt 5 was the lantern incident. There are experiences in life that force a person to develop humility. Being trapped inside a brass reading lantern while your best friend argues with a librarian is one of them. I could see the library. Sort of. Everything looked enormous and distorted through curved glass. My body had become flame correctly. That was the good news. The bad news was that I had moved into the destination flame without completing the return sequence. Muna stood over me. "Nahla." The lantern flickered. Yes. Her eyes became enormous. You're in the lantern. I had noticed. Can you come out? Excellent question. The librarian approached. Muna immediately leaned against the desk. Everything is under control. The lantern said, It is not. The librarian stared at it. Muna stared at me. I remained in that humiliating state for 11 minutes. The solution turned out to be embarrassingly simple. Human transformation spells preserve a body map. Not the entire physical body, more like a magical instruction for what shape the mana is supposed to rebuild. Half-djinn did not need one when using smokeless form or veil step. Their flame cores retained that information instinctively. Mine did not. So I added one. Attempt 6 moved me between lamps and returned me to flesh. I fell face first onto a table. Muna cheered. The librarian banned us from that floor for a week. Worth it. We repeated the experiment in an abandoned practice chamber. 4 meters became 8. 8 became 23. Then 40. On the 10th successful attempt, I stepped into the flame of a candle and emerged from a brazier on the opposite side of the room before Muna's dropped coin hit the floor. I stood there trembling. Not from exhaustion. From understanding. Everyone had been wrong. Not slightly wrong. Fundamentally wrong. My human inheritance was not preventing my djinn inheritance from completing itself. It could provide the missing structure. I went farther. A basic human shield was normally formed from 3 pieces: gathering, boundary, reinforcement. I knew that spell perfectly. I had cast it thousands of times. So instead of constructing the spell outside myself, I tried to hold the entire pattern inside the heat of my core. The first attempt gave me a fever. The second made every metal object within 2 meters too hot to touch. On the third, something shifted. I felt the shield pattern stop, behaving like instructions. It became instinct. I raised my hand. A translucent wall appeared without a spoken word, seal, gesture, or formation. Muna threw a pebble at it. The pebble bounced. We stared at each other. Do it again, she whispered. I did. Instantly. I had not cast the shield. I had remembered it with magic. We needed a name. Muna suggested structural dominion integration. I told her it sounded like plumbing. I called it concordance. She said that sounded pretentious. I said history would decide. For the next 12 days, I was very careful. Mostly. Concordance had rules. I could not simply see a spell and steal it. I had to understand it completely. Not the classroom explanation. The actual magical behavior. If I misunderstood one connection and tried to imprint it into my flame core, the structure collapsed internally. A failed heat transfer concordance left me shivering beneath 4 blankets, while the room around me reached 43 degrees. I learned another limitation. My core did not forget. That sounded useful until I realized every internalized structure interacted with every other one. Shield plus heat transfer produced something unexpected. A warding instructor struck my shield during a student demonstration. Normally, the impact would have dispersed across the barrier. Instead, the shield captured part of the force. My internal heat transfer pattern converted it. Then my djinn nature absorbed the resulting thermal energy. The stronger the instructor hit the shield, the warmer and more energized I became. He stopped. I did not. For approximately 2 seconds, every flame in the room stretched toward me. One of the Academy's measurement needles shot past its maximum mark and snapped. Nobody applauded. Muna leaned toward me and whispered, I think you have moved beyond plumbing. Professor Kadir heard about the broken instrument before lunch. By sunset, he had restricted me from supervised combat laboratories as well. I read his written order 3 times. Then I smiled. Muna saw the smile. Oh no. What? That is your malicious compliance face. I don't have a malicious compliance face. You absolutely do. Kadir's order prohibited me from using advanced combat laboratories. It said nothing about beginner wardrooms. And beginner wardrooms contain the safest, simplest, best documented spells at Aqmar. Which was perfect, because I had just discovered that simple spells became extremely interesting when I stopped casting them one at a time. People imagine becoming powerful feels like climbing. It did not. It felt like discovering I had spent 19 years trying to open a door by pushing when it had always been a sliding door. Once I understood concordance, progress stopped being linear. That was what frightened me. And if I am being truthful, what thrilled me? I internalized a wind pressure spell 3 days after the shield. Individually, it was unimpressive. First-year students used it to move training balls through obstacle courses. Then I connected it to my shield. An impact struck the barrier. The shield distributed the force. The wind structure took the distributed force and redirected it sideways. The heat structure harvested a fraction of what remained. Suddenly, attacks did not merely fail to reach me. They fed 2 different systems. Muna built a reinforced testing frame in an unused courtyard. She was very serious about safety. She also enjoyed firing increasingly heavy objects at me. Those facts are not contradictory in her mind. We began with padded practice bolts, then weighted sand bundles, then a training ram designed to test fortress wards. The ram weighed 400 kilograms. 6 students usually operated it. Muna hired 6 engineering students with pastries. I stood behind my barrier. They released the ram. The impact boomed across the courtyard. My shield flashed. Wind exploded harmlessly upward. The ram stopped dead. Heat flooded my core. My entire body felt weightless. Behind me, dust rose in a perfect circle. One of the engineering students said, very quietly, "Again." That was how rumors started. By the end of the week, students I had never spoken to were finding excuses to walk through our courtyard. Aqmar was not kind, but it was curious. Curiosity often wins eventually. Kadir arrived during another test. The crowd became silent. He studied the frame, the scorched stones, and me. Your restrictions were explicit. They were. You are prohibited from advanced combat laboratories. Yes. This is a beginner ward courtyard. Yes. His eyes narrowed. Muna suddenly found a crack in the wall, deeply fascinating. Kadir said, "You understand that compliance with the wording of an instruction while ignoring its purpose is not evidence of good judgment." I replied, "You understand that restricting my access while refusing to study the phenomenon leaves me with limited options." We stared at each other. I expected anger. Instead, he surprised me. "Show me." So I did. He cast a controlled force spell. Not powerful by his standards. More than enough to break a normal student barrier. My shield caught it. Wind rolled around us. Heat entered my core. Kadir's expression changed. Only slightly. But I saw it. For the first time, he was not looking at a failed version of something else. He was looking at a problem he did not understand. "Again," he said. His second spell was stronger. My barrier held. The third was strong enough that Muna shouted at him. I barely felt it. The energy entered the network and returned as strength. I could have continued. Kadir lowered his hand first. "What exactly have you done?" I told him about concordance. Not everything. I was still angry. That was my first real mistake. I explained the principle, but withheld the veil step experiments. Part of me wanted one impossible thing that belonged only to me. Kadir listened. Then he said, You may be reinforcing the instability. I laughed. I should not have. It came out sharper than I intended. Of course. Nahla, if I fail, I prove your theory. If I succeed, I prove the failure is more complicated. His jaw tightened. That is not what I said. It is what you keep doing. He left without answering. 2 days later, Lady Rahana of the Brass Wind arrived at Aqmar. Every Jinn student knew, before the official announcement. You could feel her from 3 courtyards away. The air moved differently. Rahana was full Jinn, perhaps 200 years old, although asking a Jinn noblewoman her age is apparently rude even when her people routinely live for centuries. She appeared human most of the time. Tall, copper-brown skin, gold eyes, dark robes embroidered with moving threads of flame. But when she passed a brazier, the fire bowed. Actually bowed. I hated how impressive it was. Rahana was visiting to renew Aqmar's exchange agreements with 3 Jinn courts. I requested a private audience. She granted me 7 minutes. That was generous by diplomatic standards. I explained that I wanted access to authentic Jinn techniques. Her expression remained polite. You possess mixed inheritance. I had noticed. The deeper racial arts require a complete flame core. Has anyone ever successfully measured a half-Jinn core while it was using structured magic? A pause. No. Has anyone tried teaching the racial arts using human scaffolding? No. Then how do you know I cannot do it? She looked at me almost sadly. Because some boundaries do not become less real because we dislike them. I felt that sentence like a slap. Not because she was cruel. Because I had heard the human version my entire life. I asked, would you demonstrate veil step? Her brows rose. For what purpose? To prove I'm asking the wrong question. She agreed. We moved to an outdoor practice circle. Kadir attended. So did Muna and 3 Jinn delegates. Rihanna stepped toward a brazier. Her body became gold flame. A heartbeat later, she emerged from sunlight shimmering above a black stone 20 meters away. Perfect. Effortless. Beautiful. She turned. Do you see? I did. I also saw something I had missed in books. There was a tiny instant during her transformation when location and body ceased to be separate ideas. Dominion carried both. I could not reproduce that instinct. But I did not need to. I had coordinates. I lit 2 braziers. Kadir said my name. I ignored him. Human geometry formed silently inside me. My body map locked. My Jinn fire rose. I stepped. The world became heat. Then I was standing beside Rahana. Nobody moved. Rahana stared at me. For perhaps the first time in 2 centuries, she seemed unsure what expression to use. That, she said eventually, was not imitation. No. You used veil step. Yes. You cannot. Muna coughed. I looked at Rihanna. Then, we have identified a documentation problem. Muna made a choking sound behind me. Rihanna almost smiled. Kadir did not. He walked directly to the nearest brazier and examined it as though I had hidden machinery inside. That demonstration should have satisfied me. It did not. For 18 years, I had wanted someone important to look at me and say I was not lesser. Now someone important was staring at proof. And all I felt was hunger. If veil step had been wrong, what else was wrong? Rahana demonstrated smokeless form 3 days later. That one nearly killed my confidence. Full Jinn could convert their entire physical bodies into smokeless flame without traveling. I could become fire for veil step only because my human structure provided origin, destination, and reconstruction. Smokeless form had no destination. The first time I tried, My right arm became translucent flame, while the rest of me remained solid. It hurt. Muna shut the experiment down immediately. For 2 days, I could not hold a cup without the handle becoming uncomfortably warm. Then, I realized the solution had already been part of Veil Step. The body map. If human transformation magic could remember what shape I needed to return to, then I did not need a destination. I needed an anchor. Attempt 4 lasted less than 1 second. But for that second, I became blue-gold flame. Entirely. When I returned, every lamp in the chamber had gone out. Rihanna whispered something in the old Jinn tongue. I did not understand it then. Later, she translated. It meant, roughly, the lost road has opened. She refused to explain why she had said it. That was the first clear sign that Aqmar contained secrets older than its professors. I should have paid more attention. Instead, I was busy becoming a problem the Academy had no category for. Dominion sense changed everything. It began as an accident. Rihanna was demonstrating how full Jinn perceived their natural element. She placed 6 enchanted stones beneath cups and told me which 3 contained bound fire mana without touching them. I asked how. She said, I can feel which flame is mine to command. Another uselessly poetic explanation. Then she made me try. I felt nothing. So I constructed a human detection lattice inside my core. Human detection spells worked by comparing known mana signatures against surrounding energy. Slow. Precise. Predictable. Jinn dominion operated through recognition. Vast. Instinctive. Impossible for me. Unless the human spell taught my core what to recognize. The moment the 2 systems touched, the room changed. I heard Muna gasp. I had not moved. But suddenly, magic was everywhere. Not visible exactly. Perceptible. The lamps felt warm in a way temperature did not explain. The ward under the floor felt like tension in a muscle. Rihanna's presence was enormous, a pressure of hot desert wind. And beyond the walls of the chamber, far below Aqmar, something pulsed. Once. Deep. Blue. I opened my eyes. What is under us? Rihanna went still. Kadir looked toward the floor. Muna said, technically several foundations. No. I pointed downward. Under that. Nobody answered. That annoyed me enough that I nearly forgot I had just awakened another racial ability no half-djinn was supposed to possess. Nearly. Dominion sense became the most useful thing I had ever learned. Human mages built structures by calculation. I could feel where those structures resisted themselves. A 6-hour formation analysis became 40 minutes. A cracked heating array in the student kitchens had confused 3 technicians for a month because all the geometry was correct. Dominion sense showed me that 2 lines were carrying identical instructions with opposite emotional signatures from the bound fire spirits. I reversed one. The kitchen worked. The cooks gave me honey cakes. That was probably the first practical reward of overwhelming magical potential. I stand by it. Within 5 weeks, I had internalized 17 basic spells. Not 17 master techniques. Basic spells. That distinction became increasingly funny. A pressure pulse plus veil step turned movement into controlled acceleration. A cooling ward plus heat transfer let me draw dangerous heat out of objects and absorb only what my core could safely handle. A light bending charm combined with smokeless form let me become nearly invisible inside heat shimmer. A reinforcement spell integrated into my body map allowed me to reconstruct after veil step without the weakness that usually followed repeated transformations. The combinations multiplied. 17 spells did not give me 17 options. They gave me hundreds. That was when Aqmar's existing measures stopped being useful. The Academy maintained a ranking system based on 7 horizons. First horizon students could reliably shape mana. Second could sustain multiple spell structures. Third could operate complex magical tools. Fourth could cast under hostile pressure. Fifth could build independent formations. Sixth could influence large environments. Seventh horizon masters could control city-scale magic. Aqmar had 23 seventh horizon masters. Professor Kadir was one of them. Rahana was not ranked because Jinn considered human classifications amusing. I was officially third horizon. That lasted until the graduation construct tried to test me. The construct was called the Bronze Examiner. It stood 3 meters tall, built from black bronze and desert glass, and had evaluated senior students for nearly 200 years. To qualify for Fifth Horizon, a candidate had to survive 12 minutes while repairing 3 deliberately damaged formations around the arena. The examiner attacked continuously. Muna was supposed to take the trial. I was helping her inspect the ward lines beforehand when the construct activated early. A fault. The arena doors sealed. The examiner turned toward us. Its chest opened. Muna said, "That is not scheduled." I gathered. A spear of compressed air hit my barrier. The floor cracked beneath my feet. 3 months earlier, that attack would have broken every defense I knew. I barely moved. The shield fed the force into my wind structure. The wind became heat. The heat entered my core. The examiner attacked again. Stronger. I felt the entire arena through Dominion sense. Every formation. Every power channel. Every command flowing through the construct. One command pattern repeated. Strike. Measure. Escalate. Strike. Measure. Escalate. I veil-stepped behind it. The examiner spun. I touched the bronze plate between its shoulders. Concordance did not allow me to steal a structure I did not understand. So I listened. 3 seconds. 5. 9. The examiner raised both arms. I understood. The construct was not alive, but its spell architecture was elegant. Human-structured magic running through a bound motion spirit. Structure giving orders. Dominion providing execution. A crude form of what I was doing. I smiled. Then I spoke the examiner's shut-down command through sovereign pressure, before I had technically learned sovereign voice. The effect was ugly. Every lamp in the arena burst. My throat burned. The construct froze. Then it knelt. The sealed doors opened. 6 instructors stood outside. Kadir was among them. Nobody spoke. Muna walked up beside me. She inspected the kneeling construct. Then she looked at Kadir. For the record, I had not started my examination. He ignored her. His attention was on me. "What did you do?" I told it to stop. That construct does not recognize verbal authority. It does now. His face changed. Not fear. Something harder for me to enjoy. Recognition. He knew. The gap between us had closed. Possibly reversed. Later that evening, he asked me to demonstrate the technique in a controlled chamber. He prepared a 7th horizon binding formation. I stepped through it. Not broke it. Stepped. The ward treated my human mana as authorized structure and my Jinn body as elemental energy. It could stop either. It could not decide what to do with both. Kadir watched me emerge outside the circle. For years, this man's opinion had shaped what I thought was possible. Now his strongest containment spell could not classify me fast enough to hold me. I expected triumph. Instead, I felt strangely empty. He said, "You are becoming extremely dangerous." I replied, "You say that like it is the same as being wrong." It is not. Then say the other thing. His eyes met mine. I wanted him to apologize. I wanted him to admit the doctrine was false. I wanted 30 years of confident scholarship to collapse into one sentence because I had earned that sentence. He said, I need more evidence. I hated him for that. And the worst part was that some piece of me understood. One impossible student did not automatically explain every mixed-blood failure in history. But I did not want nuance. I wanted vindication. So I pushed harder. That was when Ember memory awakened. It happened beneath the oldest Horizon tower. I touched an ancient brass seal during a repair exercise. The symbol showed 2 flames crossing through a circle. My core answered. For 1 second, I remembered a place I had never seen. A road made of blue glass, suspended in darkness. Doors hanging between stars. A man's hand holding mine. My father's hand. Azure. Then the memory vanished. I staggered. Muna caught me. What happened? I stared at the symbol. I don't know. The brass seal was older than Aqmar. The Academy archive claimed the 7 Horizon towers had been built by the 7 founders 6 centuries earlier. But my Dominion sense told me the seal beneath my hand was far older. And the blue pulse below Aqmar had started beating more often. Once every few hours now. Like something sleeping beneath, the Academy had heard me moving above it. The white wind reached Tassaret 41 days after I first used Veilstep. We had 7 hours of warning. That sounds generous until you have seen the white wind. Ordinary sandstorms were weather. The white wind was history. It had crossed Western trade roads 6 times in the previous century. It carried charged sand, broken spell residue, lightning, heat distortions, fragments of ancient enchantments, and enough unstable mana to strip protective seals off stone. The last time it struck a populated region, 12 settlements spent 3 years rebuilding their ward networks. Aqmar had never suffered a direct hit. The 7 Horizon array was built for exactly that kind of disaster. 7 towers. 7 senior masters. 7 interlocking defensive fields. When the warning bells began, students were moved underground while ward engineers took assigned positions. Muna was sent to the Western Tower. I was ordered to remain in the central refuge. That lasted 9 minutes. I could feel the storm before I saw it. Dominion sense turned the horizon into pressure. Thousands of magical currents grinding against each other. Fire without flame. Wind carrying broken commands. Human spell fragments mixed with elemental instincts that had no owner. It felt familiar. Not because I had experienced anything like it. Because the storm itself was mixed. Structured magic and uncontrolled dominion. The same 2 things everyone said could not coexist. I went to Kadir. He was in the central control chamber with 6 other masters. You need me in the array. No. The storm contains interacting structures. We know. You don't understand. I can feel where they connect. Kadir did not even look away from the map. You are not certified for Horizon integration. I almost laughed. Your bronze examiner knelt to me. This is not an examination. Exactly. He turned then. Nahla, 1 incorrect link in the 7 Horizon array can redirect the storm through the city. I know. You cannot treat this as another experiment. I am not. His face hardened. You are 19. There it was. Not half-djinn. Not unstable. 19. For once, his objection had nothing to do with prejudice. And that made ignoring him harder. Then the Western Horizon failed. The sound was not an explosion. It was a note. Deep enough that my bones vibrated. A line of white light vanished from the map. The storm shifted. Someone shouted that the Western Tower had lost external shielding. Muna was there. I did not ask again. I veil-stepped. The central chamber disappeared in gold-white heat. I emerged from a signal flame halfway up the western tower. The walls shook. Students and ward engineers were trying to stabilize a cracked mana conduit. Muna was on the floor beside it, one sleeve scorched, shouting instructions. She saw me. Her expression went from relief to fury. You were ordered underground. You look terrible. I am going to throw you off this tower. After the storm. Agreed. The outer wall vanished in white. Not broke. Vanished. The white wind struck. I raised my shield. 3 months earlier, I had considered Kadir's classroom demonstration powerful. The storm hit with enough force to erase that memory. My barrier screamed. Wind structures overloaded. Heat slammed into my core. For a moment, I thought I had finally found my limit. Then Dominion's sense opened wider than ever before. I felt the western tower. Then the next tower. Then another. 7 lines connected beneath Aqmar. Not 7 independent towers. One machine. The masters had been operating it as 7 people, because that was how humans understood large formations. But I was not limited to one position. I became flame. Veilstep carried me through the signal braziers linking the towers. West. Northwest. North. East. South. My body stopped mattering as a fixed location. I moved through all 7 faster than the masters could communicate. Each time I entered a tower, I touched its formation. Concordance learned. Not the entire array at once. One relationship. Then another. Boundary. Transfer. Pressure. Grounding. Reflection. Distribution. The 7th tower completed the pattern. Something inside me opened. The 7 horizon array stopped feeling external. It became comprehensible. I stood in the central tower. Kadir stared at me through the stormlight. What have you done? I understand it. No one person can operate all 7 horizons. I looked at the array. 7 towers. 7 flames. 7 pathways. I am not in one place. Then I stepped into the system. I have no better way to describe it. My body became smokeless flame. Veilstep distributed me through every tower connection. Human spell structures held the geometry. Jinn Dominion moved through the power. For 3 minutes and 12 seconds, I was the 7 horizon array. The storm struck. I held it. Aqmar's strongest masters had spent their lives learning to control one portion each. I controlled all 7 because my magic did not care about the category separating structure from authority. The storm became information. I felt its lightning, its heat, the old broken spells tumbling inside it. And beneath all of that, I found a pattern. The white wind was not one storm. It was ordinary wind carrying unstable mana that had become entangled with ancient spell debris. Destroying it required enormous power. Separating it required understanding. That was my advantage. I extended my dominion. Rihanna shouted something from the central chamber. Kadir told me to stop. Muna, over the communication line, said only, "If you know what you are doing, now would be an excellent time." I know approximately 60%. Nahla. 70. I reached into the storm. Human geometry divided currents. Jinn authority commanded the heat. My shield network redistributed pressure. Concordance synchronized everything. For one impossible moment, the entire horizon turned white. Then the storm split. Not violently. Almost gently. The wall of sand divided around Tassaret. Harmless wind passed north. Charged mana flowed south into prepared grounding fields. Lightning stretched across the sky and dissolved into gold threads. Above Aqmar, the clouds opened. Silence followed. Thousands of people had been evacuated into the academy shelters. Thousands more waited behind city wards. The white wind had reached us, and Tassaret was untouched. I returned to my body in the central tower. My knees almost failed. Kadir was standing 3 meters away. He looked smaller. Not physically. That would have been ridiculous. But the man who had once represented the absolute ceiling of magical knowledge in my life was staring at me like a student seeing a new theorem. Rihanna lowered her head. Only slightly. Then she realized she had done it. Her eyes widened. I almost laughed. Kadir did not. He walked to the array controls. Every indicator showed full stability. You operated 7 master channels simultaneously, he said. Yes. You altered a regional magical storm. Yes. You used at least 4 prohibited djinn racial functions. I prefer previously inaccessible. He ignored that. The faculty gathered. So did students. Someone asked what horizon I qualified for now. The measuring system attempted to calculate. The crystal filled with light. It reached 7th horizon. Then continued. There was no 8th mark. The crystal cracked. Muna arrived 20 minutes later, covered in dust. She looked at the broken measuring device. Then at me. I leave you alone for one emergency. That was when the ground moved. Every flame in Aqmar went blue. The 7 horizon towers answered with a sound like distant bells. The pulse beneath the academy became a continuous vibration. The floor of the central courtyard split along lines nobody knew existed. Professors raised barriers. Students backed away. 7 enormous rings appeared beneath the stone. The courtyard opened. A staircase descended into blue light. Far below Aqmar. Far deeper than the cliffs could physically contain. Rihanna whispered, "The road." Kadir turned toward her. "What road?" She did not answer. I walked to the edge. My ember memory surged. Blue glass. Darkness. Doors between stars. My father's hand. Then a voice spoke from beneath the academy. Not aloud. Inside my core. It said something in a language I did not know. I understood one word anyway. Recognized. The staircase illuminated. For 600 years, Aqmar had believed the well of blue glass beneath the academy was an ancient mana reservoir built by its founders. It was not. The founders had built Aqmar around something they found. A device. A station. A road. The bottom of the well disappeared. A circular doorway opened onto darkness filled with distant lights. I had spent my entire life trying to become powerful enough that nobody at Aqmar could define me. I had done it. I had surpassed the Academy's examinations. Its classifications. Its barriers. Even the masters who had decided what I was allowed to become. For approximately 30 seconds, I thought I had reached the top of the world. Then a man walked out of the stars. His name was Ilyas Vair. He wore a travel coat the color of pale sand, boots covered in silver dust, and a narrow metal ring around one wrist. No crown. No staff. No visible weapon. He looked perhaps 35. Dominion sense told me nothing useful. That was the first warning. Powerful people usually felt powerful. Rihanna felt like desert heat. Kadir felt like dense geometry. The 7 horizon array felt like an entire building holding its breath. Ilyas felt ordinary. Completely, offensively ordinary. He looked around the courtyard. At the towers. At the students. At me. Then he said, "This station was supposed to be dormant." Muna, standing beside me, whispered, "I dislike his definition of supposed." I asked, "Who are you?" "A wayfarer." That explains nothing. Yes. I immediately disliked him a little. Then the remains of the white wind followed him through the gate. The storm had been separated around Tassarit, but some of its unstable mana had become caught in the station's opening current. Blue-white lightning erupted from the well. The courtyard wards activated. Every 7th Horizon Master raised defenses. I stepped forward. I had stopped the storm once. I knew its structure now. Ilias raised 2 fingers. Everything froze. Wind stopped. Not weakened. Stopped. Dust hung in the air. A lightning branch remained, suspended above us. Loose pages hovered 1/2 meter above the ground. Muna's scarf had been lifted by the gust. It remained extended sideways, as though carved from cloth-colored stone. I could move. So could Ilias. Nobody else seemed able to. I reached toward the frozen lightning. No, he said. I stopped. What did you do? Restricted motion within the active road boundary. That is not a spell. It is. No formation. Not every structure needs to be drawn. No dominion pressure. Not every command needs an element. I stared at him. He closed his hand. The storm folded inward until it became a sphere the size of an orange. Then he pushed it back through the gate. Motion returned. Muna stumbled. 3 professors nearly fell. Rahana looked furious, which I realized meant she had been frozen too. I had not. Ilias looked at me again. You remained mobile. I noticed. That should not have happened. I smiled. People have been saying that about me a lot recently. That was my introduction to the caravan of worlds. The explanation took hours. I did not believe half of it until Ilias showed us the map. The well of blue glass was not a well. It was an interworld station connected to a network of magical roads crossing distances that ordinary spatial magic could not survive. Our world was one destination among thousands. Some roads crossed worlds. Some crossed dimensions where time, gravity, or magical law operated differently. The caravan maintained those roads. Not as conquerors. Mostly. Travel created problems. Disease. Invasive magic. Resource exploitation. Wars between societies with wildly different power levels. So the caravan restricted contact with isolated worlds until their civilizations either discovered the roads independently or reached certain magical thresholds. Our station had been damaged centuries ago. The isolation systems had activated. The road closed. The people who had been here became stranded, including Jinn. That part silenced Rahana. What do you mean, including Jinn? Ilias turned his wrist ring. A projection appeared. It showed a form made of smokeless flame. Then another. Dozens. The ancestors of your local courts entered through this station approximately 870 years ago. Rahana's gold eyes narrowed. You are saying we are foreign. To this world, yes. You expect me to believe our oldest histories are wrong. I expect nothing. I'm describing the transit record. I liked him slightly more after that. Kadir asked the question I was avoiding. What level of civilization built this station? Ilias looked around Aqmar. Not yours. That could have sounded insulting. It did not. It sounded like measurement. He explained that the 7 founders had discovered the station already damaged and used its emergency power reservoir to establish Aqmar. The greatest magical academy in Africa had been drawing energy from the equivalent of a stranded travel station's backup generator for 6 centuries. Muna laughed for nearly a minute. One professor became visibly offended. I understood why. Aqmar had felt enormous to us. Ancient. Supreme. The 7 Horizon Array was among the greatest achievements of modern magic. Ilyas examined it for 4 minutes and called it an ingenious local adaptation of station overflow. That hurt. Then he explained the wider world's power classifications. And that hurt much more. A competent 7th Horizon master possessed enough control to qualify for basic supervised travel on stable roads. Basic. The magical level that had made Kadir one of the most respected mages alive was considered the minimum required to avoid accidentally dying during interworld transport. I had surpassed 7th Horizon. By local standards, I was absurd. By caravan standards, Ilyas estimated that my raw output would place me somewhere among early wayfarer trainees. I stared at him. A trainee. An unusually strong one. That does not improve the sentence. Muna put a hand on my shoulder. I would like the historical record to show that approximately 6 hours ago you were the strongest student in Aqmar. I was stronger than the professors. Yes, and now you are apparently an aggressive first year again. I glared at her. She looked delighted. Ilyas, however, was not amused when he examined concordance. I demonstrated the internalized shield. Then veil step. Then smokeless form. Then the way human spell structures could scaffold djinn abilities. His expression changed more with each demonstration. Finally, he asked, "Who taught you confluence?" "I call it concordance." "Who taught you?" "No one." "That is unlikely." I was trapped in a lantern, developing the early version. He stared. Muna nodded solemnly. 11 minutes. Ilyas rubbed his forehead. Then he showed me a symbol. 2 flames crossing through a circle. The symbol beneath the oldest Horizon tower. The symbol from my ember memory. The discipline was called confluence, he said. It translated magical systems across incompatible foundations. Was. The last recognized practitioners vanished 19 years ago. My heart stopped. 19. My age. I asked, who were they? The Bridgeborn. The word entered the courtyard like another storm. Ilyas activated the projection again. Names appeared. Most meant nothing to me. Then I saw one. Aqmar Salim. My father. I forgot everyone else existed. He had disappeared when I was 6. My mother never knew why. The djinn courts claimed he had abandoned us. Human relatives said that was what djinn did. For 13 years, I had pretended not to care. I cared so much I could barely breathe. Is he alive? Ilyas's face softened. I don't know. It was not the answer I wanted. But it was honest. Before I could ask anything else, alarms sounded from the open station. Ilyas looked toward the well. His expression became serious. The isolation seal is failing. Kadir asked, how long? Ilyas examined the road. 36 hours before uncontrolled reconnection. What happens then? That depends upon what connects first. I did not like that answer. What are the options? Destroy the station. Rihanna stepped forward. And the other option? Repair it. Can you? Ilyas looked at the 7 towers. Then at me. No. I blinked. He was so much stronger than I was that he could freeze a storm by lifting 2 fingers. Yet he could not repair the station. Why? Because your founders modified it using local structured magic. The stranded djinn modified those modifications using dominion. Then 6 centuries of Aqmar masters built additional systems over both. Muna said, so it is a magical engineering crime scene. Yes. She looked delighted to finally meet someone who spoke her language. Ilyas pointed at me. But she understands both sides. For the first time since he arrived, I stopped feeling like a child looking at the ocean. Ilyas possessed more power. Far more. But power was not the problem. Translation was. And translation was what I had become. I responded to the discovery that the universe was incomprehensibly larger than I had imagined by becoming unbearable. I did not realize it immediately. Muna did. She usually does. Ilyas gave us 36 hours. His preferred solution was controlled severance. Destroy the road interface. Collapse the connection. Seal our world for perhaps another 1,000 years. Safe. Effective. Permanent. I hated it. Not only because my father might be somewhere beyond that gate. That mattered. Of course it mattered. But something deeper had changed. For years, I had imagined freedom as reaching a point where nobody could tell me no. I had reached it. Kadir could no longer prevent me from studying advanced magic. Aqmar could not measure me. Lady Rahana could not tell me which djinn abilities my blood allowed. Then I saw the road. Suddenly, staying the strongest person in Tasseret felt less like freedom and more like fear wearing expensive robes. I told Ilyas I would repair the station. He said, "You do not understand the station." "I understand more than you." "Yes." That answer removed the satisfaction. He continued, "Which is why I am allowing you to try." I spent the next 14 hours inside the well. The station extended through spaces that did not correspond properly to physical depth. One corridor should have passed directly beneath Aqmar's southern tower. Instead, it opened beneath a night sky filled with unfamiliar stars. Ilyas called it a folded maintenance space. Muna called it an architectural insult. We mapped 37 active systems. Human-structured magic had been layered across original station principles. Jinn Dominion had then altered several power channels. The Academy founders had built the 7-horizon array above all of it. Generations of professors had repaired individual symptoms without knowing what the underlying machine did. And somehow, unbelievably, it worked. Mostly. I should have asked for help immediately. Instead, I decided everyone would slow me down. That was my arrogance. It did not feel like arrogance. It felt like responsibility. That is the dangerous version. Kadir offered access to every historical archive. I accepted the books and dismissed him. Rahana offered 3 jinn memory bearers. I told her their inherited knowledge was incomplete. Muna offered to redesign the load-balancing structure around the western tower. I told her I could handle it. She stared at me. "You have not slept." "I don't need much sleep after concordance." "You set your own blanket on fire yesterday." "That was unrelated." "You became so hot while dreaming that your pillow smoked." "Very slightly." "Nahla, I have 36 hours." "We have 36 hours." I pretended not to hear the difference. "That cost us 4. I attempted to combine station movement geometry with my internal veil step structure. The logic seemed sound. The station used something similar to Ilyas's motion principle. Not force. Not wind. The concept of movement itself. I could not understand it fully. But I thought I understood enough. That should have frightened me. Concordance punished incomplete understanding. I knew that. I tried anyway. The structure collapsed inside my core. Every muscle locked. My smokeless form triggered reflexively. I became flame. Then could not reconstruct properly. For 8 seconds, my body shifted between solid and fire. The heat wave shattered every glass panel in the maintenance chamber. More importantly, it surged into the station. A pressure pulse traveled upward. The oldest horizon tower cracked from base to 3rd level. Nobody died. Because Muna's emergency ward caught the collapse. The ward I had told her was unnecessary. When I regained consciousness, I was lying on a stone platform with Rahana holding one wrist and Kadir stabilizing a human reconstruction lattice around my chest. Muna stood farther away, arms folded. She looked angrier than I had ever seen her. I said, "How bad?" She replied, "You cracked a tower." Structurally. What other kind of cracked would make that sentence better? I sat up slowly. My head felt full of sand. Muna. No. That hurt more than the failed concordance. She walked closer. You know what is impressive about you? This feels dangerous. You spent your whole life furious because people looked at your blood and decided what you could not do. I said nothing. Then the moment you became powerful enough, you started looking at everyone else and deciding what we could not help with. That is not what I... Yes, it is. Her voice did not rise. That made it worse. You stopped telling me what you were testing. You dismissed Kadir because you wanted him to feel irrelevant. You dismissed Rahana because she was wrong about Half-djinn. You stopped collaborating because for the first time nobody could force you to. I looked at Kadir. He had the decency to pretend to be interested in the reconstruction lattice. Muna continued. You didn't become independent. You became isolated. I wanted to argue. I had excellent arguments. I was stronger than everyone at Aqmar. They physically could not follow me into some parts of the station safely. Ilyas was the only person present whose raw power exceeded mine. The stakes were enormous. I had good reasons. None of them changed the truth. I said I was afraid. Muna's anger shifted. Of what? That if I let everyone help, then I wasn't actually enough. There. I hated hearing it aloud. For years, I had imagined vindication as proving I did not need the people who rejected me. But there is a difference between not needing permission and not needing people. I had confused them. Kadir finally spoke. Nahla. I looked at him. He removed a worn leather notebook from his robe. My original research. I almost laughed. Your doctrine. The work before the doctrine. I did not want it. Which meant I probably needed to read it. The notebook described the accident that had shaped his career. 22 years earlier, Kadir had been a young researcher studying mixed magical inheritance. A half-djinn apprentice had attempted to use a full racial transformation. His core destabilized. 3 people were injured. The apprentice survived, but lost most of his magical capacity. Kadir had spent years studying why. He concluded that mixed systems rejected each other. Then every later failure looked like confirmation. What was his human training? I asked. Minimal. Did he use structural stabilization? No. Did you test whether human magic could support the transformation? We believed introducing additional structure would worsen the conflict. So you never tested it? No. I looked at him. You built 30 years of restrictions around a question you stopped asking. His face tightened. Yes. The word was quiet. Not enough to repair my childhood. Not enough to undo every opportunity denied to people like me. But it was the first time he had said it. Rihanna stepped forward. We did the same. That surprised me more. She looked toward the well. Jinn courts preserved stories of the lost road. We also preserved warnings. Mixed offspring were said to stand between fires and belong fully to neither. I knew that phrase. Every half-djinn did. Rihanna continued. We interpreted it as deficiency. What did it originally mean? Her gold eyes met mine. We no longer know. Ember memory stirred. My father's hand. Blue glass. A symbol of crossing flames. Maybe the phrase had never meant broken. Maybe standing between 2 fires had once described a job. I looked at everyone. Muna. Kadir. Rihanna. Ilyas. The station pulsed beneath us. 22 hours remained. I said, fine. Muna raised an eyebrow. Fine what? We do it together. More specific. I sighed. I will stop behaving like an unbearable magical demigod. Kadir coughed. Rihanna looked away. Ilyas smiled. Muna considered. For 22 hours. Let's start there. She held out her hand. I took it. Then we went back into the well. This time, I brought everyone. Once I stopped trying to prove I could do everything alone, we discovered the actual problem in 3 hours. I found that irritating. Muna found it hilarious. The station had 3 overlapping systems. The original road architecture controlled movement between worlds. The stranded djinn had added dominion channels that allowed local elemental power to substitute for damaged components. The human founders later wrapped those channels inside structured formations because they could not directly command them. It was ugly, brilliant, fragile. The white wind had forced me to activate the 7 horizon ray beyond anything it had done in centuries. That surge woke the station. My concordance signature completed a recognition circuit that had been waiting for a confluence practitioner. In other words, the gate had opened because of me. Not intentionally. But consequences do not care about intention. The road was now trying to reconnect to its network. The damaged station could not regulate the incoming power. If uncontrolled connection occurred, the entire structure would attempt to move into transit. Aqmar included. Possibly part of Tassarit. Muna summarized it beautifully. The Academy may accidentally leave the world. Kadir looked ill. How much of the city? She checked the calculations. Best case, none. And worst. She looked at me. Let's continue working. We had 11 hours. Ilyas could sever the station at any moment. He reminded me twice. Not as pressure, as responsibility. If the transition begins, he said, I will destroy the road. I understand. You may not have time to object. I understand. And if you are inside the core when I do it, I understand. Muna looked at me. You are not doing that heroic thing where you pretend the last sentence was acceptable. I wasn't. You made the face. I apparently have too many faces. The repair required something nobody present could do individually. Kadir understood the human geometry better than anyone. Rihanna understood dominion channels preserved through djinn tradition. Muna understood load distribution across the modern ward network. I understood how the systems could translate into each other. Ilyas understood the road itself. For the first time in my life, my mixed blood was not a problem being accommodated. It was the central requirement. That realization hit harder than becoming stronger than Kadir. I had wanted humans to admit I was enough. I had wanted djinn to admit I was enough. Now both groups were handing me pieces they could not connect without me. Not because I was half of either. Because I was fully something else. We built the solution around concordance. The 7 horizon array would stabilize the local side. Rihanna and the other djinn would hold the elemental channels. Kadir's masters would maintain the structured geometry. Muna would manage load transfer. I would enter the station core in smokeless form, use dominion sense to feel the active road, and rewrite the relationship between the 3 systems. Simple, if you ignore every relevant detail. The road core existed partly outside local space. Ordinary flesh could not survive direct exposure. Smokeless form solved that. The road's original logic operated beyond human-structured magic. Ilyas would provide a simplified motion anchor. I could not conquer it. I had learned that lesson. Instead, I would treat it as an external fixed principle. The station would move power around that anchor. Human geometry would determine where. Jinn dominion would determine what obeyed. Concordance would translate between them. 9 hours remained when the sky changed. Stars appeared. It was midday. People across Tasseret stopped in the streets. Above Aqmar, points of silver light became visible through blue sky. Not stars from our night. Other destinations. The road was connecting. Ilyas looked up. We have less time. How much? Perhaps 40 minutes. Naturally, the academy evacuation began. I could hear bells across Tasseret. No panic. Just movement. Wardens guiding civilians away from the cliffs. Students carrying emergency kits. Professors reinforcing routes. The same institution that had spent years deciding where I was allowed to go was now following a plan built around my magic. I expected that to feel satisfying. Instead, I kept thinking about how many people were trusting me. Power changes fear. At first, I had been afraid people could hurt me. Now I was afraid I could fail them. The road activated. Gravity shifted. Loose stones rose. The 7 horizon towers leaned inward without physically moving. The well became a column of blue light. Ilyas shouted, "Now." I became flame. Smokeless form no longer hurt. That alone would have been impossible 2 months earlier. I entered the well. The road opened around me. There are no words for that place. Imagine standing inside distance. Not a road through space. Distance itself. Thousands of pathways crossed darkness. Some were threads. Some were rivers. Some looked like entire skis, folded into lines. My world felt behind me like a warm coal. Small. Precious. Ahead were places so powerful, I could sense them through sealed gates. Civilizations where magic pressed against reality, like oceans against glass. For 1 second, I understood how small I was. Then something enormous moved along a distant road. Not toward me. Not interested in me. Its presence alone made my flame core tremble. Ilyas's voice reached me through the anchor. Do not look farther. I wasn't planning to. That was a lie. I wanted to look. I wanted to see everything. But Aqmar was behind me. Muna was behind me. My mother was somewhere in Tasseret. The world I had spent my life trying to escape being defined by was suddenly the thing I most wanted to protect. The station began pulling. I felt stone foundations shift. The road had begun transit. I activated concordance. 7 horizon geometry entered my awareness. West. Northwest. North. East. Southeast. South. Southwest. 7 points. Human structure. Rahana's dominion burned through the elemental channels. Kadir's spellwork locked the boundaries. Muna redistributed load as tower pressures changed. I connected them. The first connection failed. Power rebounded. 1 horizon went dark. Muna's voice came through. Southwest offline. I know. Can you restore it? Yes. How? I don't know yet. Wonderful. I almost laughed. Then Ember memory opened. Not fragments this time. A full memory. My father stood where I was standing. Not older. Not younger. Just azure. Blue road light across his face. He was showing someone how to stabilize a translation junction. I could not hear his words, but I felt the structure. 2 incompatible systems did not need to become one. That had been my mistake. Concordance was not fusion. It was translation. Human magic did not need to behave like Jinn magic. Jinn magic did not need to obey human geometry. The road did not need to become either. They only needed an agreement about what crossed between them. I changed the structure. The pressure vanished. Southwest horizon reignited. Then the station reacted to me. A symbol appeared in the darkness. 2 crossing flames. Bridgeborn. The road recognized my core. Not as a passenger. As an operator. Ilias said something I could not hear. The incoming current surged. This time, I did not resist it. I translated it. Movement became boundary. Boundary became dominion. Dominion became structure. Structure became root. The entire station shook. Above me, through layers of folded space, I felt the 7 towers ignite. I felt Kadir lose one formation and rebuild it. I felt Rahana's dominion falter, then strengthen when 2 younger jinn joined her. I felt Muna redirect enough power through the Western network to light every ward stone between Aqmar and Tasseret. Nobody was supporting me. We were supporting each other. That difference mattered. The road tried to pull Aqmar into transit one final time. I gave it a different instruction. Not leave. Connect. Not open. Recognize. Not isolate. Regulate. The station answered. Blue light became gold. Every pathway around me stopped trembling. The enormous current flowing toward our world narrowed into one controlled line. I felt the gate establish boundaries. Stable. Measured. Safe. Then something in my core expanded. Not more mana. Understanding. My concordance patterns rearranged around the principle I had just learned. Translation itself became something I could feel. I was not suddenly as powerful as Ilias. Not remotely. But I had touched the edge of the kind of magic he used. A higher law. And I had used it in a way he could not. The station stabilized. I returned to the courtyard in a column of blue-gold flame. The 7 towers were still standing. Tasseret was still where geography had left it. Thousands of stars vanished from the daytime sky. Only the well remained open. A controlled circle of darkness filled with distant light. Ilias stood beside it. He looked at the station. Then at me. What did you do? I was exhausted enough to sit on the ground. I repaired it. Yes. That was the objective. He laughed. It was the first time I had heard him do that. No, you rewrote the local access law. I looked at him. Is that bad? It should be impossible. I lay back on the warm stone. People really need new vocabulary around me. Muna sat beside me. Her hair was full of dust. One sleeve was torn. She looked toward the stable gate. So. Still an aggressive first year. I looked at Ilias. He considered. Advanced first year. I groaned. Muna laughed until she cried. Aqmar changed slowly. That surprised me. I had expected one enormous magical event to transform everything overnight. It turns out institutions are capable of surviving dimensional revelations and still requiring 3 signatures to change a classroom allocation. Professor Kadir's doctrine of separate flames was formally suspended 11 days after the white wind. Not destroyed. Not burned. Suspended pending review. That mattered to me more than dramatic punishment would have. Kadir lost authority over mixed inheritance certification, while the restrictions based on his doctrine were examined. 7 courses reopened to Half-djinn students immediately. 3 safety classifications were rewritten. 2 laboratories complained. The laboratories lost. Kadir requested permission to continue teaching. The faculty granted it under conditions. He accepted. He also began rewriting his textbook. I know because he asked me to review the chapter on mixed cores. I sent back 43 corrections. He returned the manuscript with 30 accepted, 9 disputed, and 4 marked with the academic equivalent of absolutely not. It was strangely satisfying. I never received the apology I had imagined when I was younger. Not one grand speech that repaired everything. Instead, I received something more difficult. He changed his mind publicly. He surrendered authority, built around being right. He admitted where evidence had ended and assumption had begun. That did not erase the damage. It did mean he stopped extending it. For me, that was enough to move forward. Not forget. Forward. Lady Rahana remained at Aqmar for another month. The Jinn courts had reacted badly to learning that their ancestors were interworld travelers. Some called the caravan records fraudulent. Others immediately wanted access to the station. 3 separate court delegations arrived in 9 days. Rahana handled most of them with the expression of someone discovering that diplomacy is simply arguing with relatives while wearing expensive clothing. She offered me formal recognition under the brass wind court. It would have made me the first half-djinn admitted into one of their high houses in more than a century. At 16, I would have cried. At 19, I asked, would you have offered if I couldn't use full racial abilities? She went silent. That was my answer. I appreciate the offer, I said, but I don't want acceptance that begins after usefulness. Her face tightened. Then she nodded. I cannot say that is unfair. We did not become enemies. In fact, Rahana began teaching me Ember memory properly. Not because I joined her court. Because she finally accepted that knowledge should not be withheld from me based on what percentage of my blood she respected. That distinction mattered. Muna passed her 5th Horizon qualification 2 months later. The bronze examiner behaved perfectly. Probably because I had threatened to melt it if it embarrassed her. I am joking. Mostly. She became a junior Horizon warden and chose the western districts around Tasseret for her field assignment. You could travel between worlds, I told her, and you want to repair village ward towers. Yes. Why? Because people live there. That answer reminded me why she had never been impressed by power for its own sake. My own status became complicated. Aqmar's ranking office attempted to create a new classification for me. 8th Horizon sounded obvious. I refused. There had never been an 8th Horizon. Pretending I was simply 1 step above 7th made the same mistake the Academy had already made. My magic no longer fit the ladder. So officially, my student file listed me as 7 Horizons complete, Confluence unclassified. Muna said that sounded like a disease. The stable gate changed Aqmar more than anything else. The caravan did not immediately allow unrestricted travel. Ilyas was extremely clear about that. Our world had been isolated for centuries. Opening trade overnight would destroy economies, spread dangerous artifacts, and encourage every ambitious idiot with a wand to attempt interworld tourism. So access began slowly. Caravan engineers arrived. Historians, translators, medical specialists, road wardens. They treated Aqmar with respect, which surprised some of our professors after Ilyas had casually called their greatest formation local infrastructure. Then I learned something important. Being small did not mean being worthless. Our structured magic had developed in isolation. So had our Jinn practices. Some techniques considered ordinary at Aqmar were unusual elsewhere. Muna's desert ward designs impressed a caravan engineer enough that he spent 3 days asking her questions. She became unbearable. I deserved that. Ilyas stayed until the station was fully stable. During that time, he showed me basic wayfarer exercises. They were humiliating. I could stop a 7th Horizon attack with 1 hand. I could cross kilometers through connected flame. I could become smokeless fire. I could command city-scale weather structures. Then Ilyas asked me to move a pebble without applying force. I failed for 4 hours. He moved it by altering the relationship between location and rest. I accused him of cheating. He said higher magic often looked like cheating to people who had not learned it. I hated how much I liked that sentence. But I was progressing. Vast. Concordance worked even better with wider world principles than Ilya's expected. I could not internalize a higher law without understanding it. That limitation remained. But once I understood enough, my mixed nature let me translate the principle into structures my core could use. By the time Ilya's left, I could create a localized stillness field lasting slightly less than 1 second. Pathetic compared with his ability to freeze an entire courtyard. Completely impossible by Aqmar standards. Both things were true. That became my new understanding of power. Context mattered. My first real conversation with my mother about the road happened on our roof in Tasseret. She had listened patiently while everyone else debated history, politics, magic, djinn migration, and the caravan. Then she asked one question. "Did you find anything about your father?" I told her the truth. The Bridgeborn had disappeared 19 years ago. Azure had been one of them. No confirmed death. No confirmed location. No explanation for why he left. My mother was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "He loved you." I looked away. People who love you still leave. Yes. That was all. No convenient answer. No absolution. But now the road existed. And for the first time, not knowing did not feel permanent. 3 days before Ilya's departed, he handed me a small metal token. Dark silver. 2 crossing flames engraved on one side. A road symbol on the other. "A temporary wayfarer authorization," he said. "For where?" "Eventually, anywhere you qualify to survive." That sounds encouraging. It is meant to be. And immediately. The nearest caravan training station. I turned the token between my fingers. "How strong are the students?" He considered. "Some weaker than you." I smiled. Some significantly stronger." My smile vanished. Muna, standing nearby, laughed. I asked, "And the instructors?" Ilya's did not answer. I decided I did not want to know yet. On my final night, before choosing whether to use the token, I returned to the Eastern dormitory. The same building whose security wards had been arguing with my existence for 3 years. I placed my hand against the brass plate. Orange light. Student identity confirmed. Red light. Djinn presence detected. Orange. Student identity confirmed. Red. Potential external transit signature detected. I stared at the door. Muna stood beside me carrying a box. The door flashed yellow. Classification unavailable. I waited. It locked itself. Muna laughed so hard she had to put the box down. I could have destroyed the ward. I could have rewritten it. I could have become flame and passed through the keyhole. Instead, I walked around the building. I climbed through my bedroom window. One last time. My room looked smaller than I remembered. The desk where Muna and I had drawn the first veil step calculations. The scorch mark from my failed heat transfer concordance. The brass lantern I had purchased from the library after the librarian threatened to throw it away. I kept that lantern. Some objects deserve to survive the historical record. I sat on the windowsill with the Wayfarer token in one hand. Beyond Aqmar, Tasseret glowed beneath desert stars. The 7 horizon towers shone around the academy. Once, those towers had represented the highest power I could imagine. Then I became strong enough to control all 7. Once, Professor Kadyr's approval had seemed capable of determining my future. Then I became stronger than the system he represented. Once, Full Djinn had told me their racial gifts were closed to people like me. Then Flame itself disagreed. I had wanted power, so nobody could decide what I was allowed to become. I got it. And when I finally reached the top of everything I knew, I discovered something almost funny. There was no top. There was only the edge of the map. I still had not found my father. I did not know why the Bridgeborn disappeared. I did not know why my core carried a discipline the wider world considered lost. I did not know what had moved along that distant road strongly enough to make my supposedly overwhelming magic tremble. Those questions could wait for another journey. This one was complete. Aqmar survived. Tassarit survived. The rules that had limited people like me were changing. Muna had the career she wanted. Kadir had finally learned that expertise could become blindness when defended too long. Rihanna had begun asking questions her courts had avoided for centuries. And I no longer needed either humans or jinn to calculate how much of me counted. The next morning, I carried the lantern downstairs. The dormitory door refused to let me out. I stared at it. Then I started laughing. Not politely. Not quietly. I laughed until 2 first-year students came downstairs to see what was happening. One of them looked at the flashing ward. Then at me. "Aren't you the woman who stopped the white wind?" "Yes." "The one who opened the road between worlds?" "Yes." "The one who can become fire?" "Yes." He pointed at the locked door. "Can't you do something about that?" I considered burning through it. Rewriting it. Teleporting. Applying a higher principle of motion, just to move one extremely stubborn piece of wood. Instead, I opened the window. "Some battles," I told him, "are about knowing when you've already won." I climbed out. Muna was waiting below. The Wayfarer token warmed in my pocket. Beyond the academy, deep beneath the well of blue glass, a road stretched farther than any map I had ever seen. I had spent 19 years being told I stood between two kinds of power, and therefore belonged completely to neither. It turned out they were right about only one thing. I was standing between them. They just never understood that sometimes the person standing between two worlds is not divided by them. Sometimes she is the bridge.